Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening, or whatever time of day it is, in case you're calling in from elsewhere. That's been nice also, is we've been both able to expand our reach for speakers during the time when we're doing remote events like tonight's speaker. And also participants. We've had people call in who would definitely normally not be able to make it to a DC meetup, which we really appreciate. So to get started, as a bit of intro here, here are your View DC organizers. I'm Jack. I work at Politico. Ben, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. We need to update the slide.
Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
I'm Ben
That's my
Hahn. I'm
bad.
no, it's all good. On the Vue.js core team, and yes, I no longer work at GitLab. I'm actually at Cypress.io, and you can find me on the Internet of Things at Ben Code Zen.
Ben's too popular for his own good, so we have to make sure we're updating the slides quite
Hardy,
regularly.
har.
Sorry about that. Tracy?
Hi, I'm Tracy. I work at Bloomberg Industry Group.
And Chris?
Hey guys, this slide is very accurate for me. I still work at Politico. I'm a
How many years?
lead
How many
front-end
years?
engineer there. I am on my 11th currently.
Awesome.
It's impressive.
Nice. And I'll give a full introduction to our speaker later as we're about to get started. But Kim, do you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. I will wait for my introduction. I also have a introductory slide as well, so I don't want to overdo it right now.
Yeah, then we don't want to steal your thunder from yourself. So VueDC has been around since December 2017. I grabbed the latest numbers from Meetup today, which is 959 members, which is great. So tell your friends so that one of your friends can be the 1,000th member. First meetup was December 6, 2017, and the crazy stat that we did verify is that we have successfully had at least one meetup every month since then, which is great. I think that's kind of tricky with community organized events sometimes, so we're proud of that. Mostly Tracy and Ben and Chris should be proud of that. I joined a little bit later. And then so for as long as obviously in-person events are difficult, we're going to keep going at that pace, so it'll be a meetup a month remotely, and we do the third Wednesday of every month, like this Wednesday. So I mentioned for some people who were on here early, and we had this slide up, which just shows a little bit of the Zoom interface that you'll be seeing. We're using Zoom Webinar tonight, so there are a couple features that might be a little different from what you're used to seeing if you've done a number of Zoom calls. Namely, there are a couple ways to interact with us whenever you have questions you'd like to clarify. So one, you can throw anything in the Q&A panel. It allows you to ask a question, then one of the panelists can make sure it gets answered, either by text or over audio. You can also add anything you want in the chat panel, directed to the panelists or directed to everyone. That's just on the bottom right of your screen. And then finally, you can press the easy raise your hand button. That'll let us know you have some kind of question. We'll make sure that gets addressed. During the presentation, we'll just ask to hold all questions to the end, and then we'll have a Q&A portion for for as long as we need, which is great. Day-to-day support. We mentioned this at each meetup. We have a Discord channel where we have kind of day-to-day conversations. If you have any questions about using Vue or any technical issues or things we can help you address, we have this viewdc.io site, and you can find us on GitHub and Twitter. So please take a look at those references. Upcoming meetups. We have the next 2 meetups planned. So July 15th, again, the third Wednesday of every month, we're going to be doing lightning talks, which we enjoy a lot. We really have gotten some excellent submissions for lightning talks. Some of them have then branched out into longer follow-up talks for a full-length session. Well, I'll mention then August 19th, we're going to do a panel or discussion some way focused around Vue 3, because obviously that's a topical thing that we want to make sure gets covered for people. So that'll be in August. But back to the lightning talks. So there'll be coming up on July 15th will be the meetup. We ask that people submit talks by the beginning of July, just so we can plan out scheduling for that. But we want to emphasize, if you have any idea at all of something that you've enjoyed using with Vue, or that was a fun challenge to figure out, or maybe a difficult challenge that you're still working on figuring out, it can be your first talk, it can be your 10th talk. But we're really happy to work with you on any subject Vue related that you find interesting. So you can use this link if one of our panelists can grab that link and throw it in the chat so that people can click through to it easily. Or feel free to just message the panelists while this event is going on with an idea, maybe an email that we can reach out to you with. And then, like I said, we're very happy to work through any talk ideas that you have. It's a great way, especially if you're thinking, I did this thing with Vue and I didn't see it talked about much, but I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's tricky enough or complex enough that it warrants a full talk, or I haven't given a full talk yet. Lightning talks should be a very accessible way for people to get started. We typically do anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. So even if you have like a 5-minute thing you want to talk about, let us know. You can, again, use that link or vuejsdc@gmail.com. Okay, so something we picked up, we have to give credit where credit is due. Something that Chris picked up from Vue NYC is we'd like to make things at least a little bit interactive and keep them light. So right now it's trivia time. And I am going to pass it over to Tracy for our somewhat Vue-related, somewhat just fun-related quick activity before we get started with Kim's talk. So we will be doing one more quick round at the end. Unfortunately, we don't have any definitive raffle prizes right now because it's a lot harder to do that remotely, but bragging rights for sure. So please.
Oh, but Jack, talk about the new badge.
Oh, well, I don't have an image. How about while we're doing Kim's talk, we'll make sure we get an image pulled up for that once we're done.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so people are making great use of the chat, which is really good to see. We've got some links in there to follow up episodes. Please, during Kim's talk, feel free to log any questions you'd like. We'll make sure to pull those up as the first ones that get asked during the Q&A portion. Okay, here we go. So now, without further ado, because we've had plenty of ado, this will be 7 Secrets of Highly Successful Developers, a talk given by Kim. And I do want to read her bio real quick because I think a lot of us, actually maybe all the panelists, first heard a version of this talk at Vue Vixens, which was the follow-up to VueConf in Austin. And I just thought it was really excellent, especially because Kim's pulling from a lot of experience in the industry. So Kim is the head of developer relations and community at Gatsby, an Auth0 ambassador, Google developer expert in security and identity, and Microsoft MVP in developer technologies. She's passionate about making the web a better place, building things with JavaScript, constant learning, and developer communities. As a developer advocate leader, engineer, and international speaker, she loves learning from and sharing with other inhabitants of the tech space. She also enjoys mentoring engineers who are interested in leadership. So thanks so much to Kim for taking the time to join us tonight, and I will pass it off to her. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Jack. I'll share my screen. And I'm also going to stop my video because I have country internet that doesn't withstand uploading 2 things at once very, very nicely. Okay, so thank you for that introduction. My talk is called 7 Secrets of Highly Successful Developers. And I have sort of my LinkedIn profile here, but I think that I've already been introduced, so I'll go through this pretty quickly. As was already mentioned, I'm the head of DevRel and Community at Gatsby. I'm a GD in Security and Identity. I'm an MVP in Developer Technologies, and I'm the former head of at Auth0, so now I am an Auth0 ambassador. So we're developers, looks like that we operate in. We work in tech, and tech is an incredibly fast-paced industry. As such, we're always facing new tools, new libraries, new frameworks, new trends, new best practices. Essentially, we're constantly bombarded by information, and there's this constant expectation that we're also always learning new things. And as developers in tech, what challenges do we face on our journey to become quote unquote successful? And what does that look like? Well, for one thing, in this incredibly fast-paced industry, it can be very easy to start to feel a little bit behind. When things move very fast, we can get into this sort of sinkhole of feeling like we're just not learning enough quickly enough, is keeping up with the Joneses. And I want to talk for just a minute about where this came from. So Keeping Up with the Joneses was actually a comic by Arthur Pop Momond, and it ran from 1913 to 1940, so it had a good long run. And essentially this comic was about the social climbing family of Aloysius and Clarice McGinnis. And Aloysius and Clarice are always comparing themselves to this other family, the Joneses, who are primarily off-screen. You don't ever really actually see them in the comic. But here's a sample panel from this comic, and I want to make a little bit of a note that this is a little bit dated. It ran from 1913 to 1940, so just kind of keep that in mind. But Clarice is saying, look at Mrs. Jones. She goes to matinees, she entertains, she wears wonderful clothes, she gets something out of life. And this is a concept that can resonate with us in tech, the idea of keeping up with other people, the people that are around us, and their achievements and their accomplishments. So if we want to translate this into a sort of modern tech space, maybe Clarice would be saying something like this instead. Maybe she would say, look at Mrs. Jones. She keynotes conferences. She writes a blog post every week. She was promoted to principal architect. She gets something out of life. Now, we're constantly inundated with social media and the connected web, the people who are around us in technology. So keeping up with the Joneses can really make us feel this pressure to learn everything, to learn the things that other people are learning, to learn the things that are new and hot right at the moment. And this can lead to fear of missing out, or FOMO. Now, these new technologies pop up incredibly quickly. The developer ecosystem is, in and of itself, actually a pretty overwhelming place. We feel this pressure to learn new frameworks as they start appearing, new libraries. We have to get good at testing. We have to learn about new tech stacks. And we can become quite afraid that if we don't learn everything fast enough, then maybe we're going to fall behind, or we're going to miss something really important that maybe we should have known, and the ship is going to sail and everybody else knows it and we don't know it. Now, developers also have extremely demanding jobs. All of this sort of idea of fast-paced industry, keeping up with the Joneses, getting this fear of missing out, leads to demanding job expectations. And as a result, this can also lead to things like working long hours or having very few opportunities at work where we feel like we can maybe kind of take a breather and rest our brains a little bit. And this can inevitably lead to burnout. A burnout's characterized by a lot of things. One of them is a lack of motivation, but it can also be mental and emotional and physical exhaustion. It can lead to depression. It can lead to anxiety. It can lead to feelings of worthlessness and dread. It could manifest as a loss of passion for the things that would normally get you really enthusiastic and excited. So we talked about the challenges that we face in tech. How do we meet these challenges head on and prevent them? Or if we are facing them and having some fallout because of them, how do we overcome that? My talk today is about 7 tips to hopefully help you to achieve a balance between happiness, fulfillment, and career acceleration. Something's going. Slide there. So because this is sort of tips for being highly successful, I want to define what that even means in the first place. And it means a few things to me. And one of those things is personal fulfillment and satisfaction. Being highly successful can mean feeling good about what you're doing. Now, you can make a ton of money, you can get promotions, you can sort of get this great reputation, but if you don't feel good about it, then I don't consider that being highly successful. It also means that you feel good about having an upward trending career trajectory. This is things like the opportunity to progress your career, the opportunity to achieve more goals, and to feel like you're going somewhere, essentially. Because if you're at sort of the top of that ladder and you don't feel like there's anywhere left for you to go, then ask yourself, are you actually highly successful then? If you're at the end of your rope? It also means having an upward trending reward trajectory. Because quite honestly, we work for money. There's not that many people who have the privilege to work sort of for fun and not for some kind of monetary financial reward. So knowing that you have a trajectory that is positively trending for that as well, and something to strive for, is also a tenet of being highly successful. So what are these 7 secrets? Let's talk about them. I already talked about the temptation to compare yourself to people who surround you in your daily life, the people who you get information from a lot, maybe your coworkers or your friends or people on Twitter or famous contributors on GitHub or something. But really, what you should be doing is focusing on comparing yourself to one particular person. And that person is the person that you were yesterday or last week or maybe a year ago. So let me give you a little bit of a hypothetical example here. Let's say that you have a friend who keeps talking about Svelte. They're saying Svelte is the path forward for reactive JavaScript. It's awesome. You really need to learn it. They won't stop talking about it. You agree that this sounds interesting. It sounds like a very interesting piece of technology, and it could be useful. But right now, the cognitive burden of learning something brand new like that, not to mention the hours that you would have to invest, is just really, really high, and it causes you some stress to think about kind of jumping into that right now. Maybe just last week, you learned Vuex. Still, Svelte does sound neat, so you might feel a little bit tempted to spend some late nights looking into it because you're feeling that pressure of fear of missing out, of keeping up with the Joneses. But I would encourage you to take a step back. Acknowledge the fact that you just learned something new yourself, and this is something that you didn't know a month ago. So you should really take the time to acknowledge your own progress and your own accomplishments. You are the benchmark that matters. So one of the things that can really help you to sort of keep track of the things that you've done is write down your successes, write down your achievements as they happen. 6 months, and take a look at that list. Review the things that you've accomplished within sort of the recent history, and I guarantee that you're going to impress yourself with what you've done. It's very hard to recognize these things right in the moment, but if you keep a record of them and come back to it and look at how far you've come, you will be impressed with yourself. Another thing that I would recommend is every 3 months or so, set some personal goals. And when you're setting goals, there's a few things to keep in mind. I think one of the important things is that the purpose of these goals is not to make yourself feel pressured or stressed out. So make sure that you're choosing goals that you feel passionate about, that you are confident that you can follow through on, that you have the drive and motivation to accomplish. And don't set goals that you suspect that you won't achieve. I think very often we are pretty eager to set some lofty goals so that we can say, oh, I accomplished this huge, amazing thing. But then when it comes down to it, we don't find ourselves having the time or maybe the extra energy to accomplish something huge. So make sure that you're picking things that are realistically achievable, that you feel passionate about, things that will help you accomplish things that you can be proud of. Here's some examples of good 3-month goals that you can try out. You could, for example, maybe apply for an experts program. There are a lot of these sort of ambassador programs out there right now, and it can be a great exercise to go through the application process for them. You could contribute to a community that you care deeply about. You could write a blog post about something that you learned recently. And as mentioned earlier at this meetup, you could speak at a local meetup. And if you're a little bit nervous about this, starting out with something like Jack mentioned, like a lightning talk might be a great way in. You could also ask someone that you admire for career advice. And you could open up a discussion with your manager about career growth. Now you should revisit your goals every few months. Do a little bit of a check-in with yourself. And if you didn't meet goals, maybe that particular goal was unrealistic, or maybe the timing for the goal just wasn't particularly great. So create new goals, and then you can carry over unfinished goals depending on how passionate you are about them. Now, if the same goal keeps staying on the list and remains unfulfilled, look at it and first identify, is it something that you really care about, that you are realistically going to achieve? Or maybe it's just in too big of a chunk. Can it be broken down into smaller, more accomplishable parts? And then you can put the sort of iterated parts onto your goal list as time goes by. And the more you do this, the more comfortable you get with the process and understand how you yourself go through the exercise of setting goals for yourself that are realistic and achievable. And I know that for myself, for example, I really like to make lists. I'm very big into checklists. And one thing that I find myself doing every now and then is putting something on a checklist that I'm literally like a minute away from doing or accomplishing, just for the pure cathartic joy of checking it off. And I want to emphasize that that's fine to do with this. That's okay, because anything that gives you a sense of accomplishment and a record of something that you've done that you can feel proud of is totally valid for this type of exercise. Number 3 is share your wins. And I want to emphasize that you don't have to be shy about this. Sharing your wins with the right audience at the right time got many, many extraordinarily successful people where they are today. And arguably the most important way to share wins is with your boss. So managers typically want to do right by their team members. A good manager will always try to lift up and reward their team members and recognize their accomplishments. And they'll try to do this without micromanaging. But there's a lot that happens at any workplace that's outside of the line of sight of your manager. So here's some examples. Maybe you debugged a really difficult issue. Maybe you helped a coworker accomplish something that they were having trouble with. Maybe you programmed a really challenging feature. Maybe you shipped a patch for something that was sort of in urgent need of a fix, and you shipped that to production, but it could have been very small. Maybe you did some public speaking and received praise for a presentation, and your boss might know about some of these things, but they're definitely not going to know about all of them. unless you share those things with your manager. The result of sharing these types of activities and wins with your manager is they're going to recognize what you've done. Recognition naturally leads to things like promotion, performance, compensation increases, bonuses. Maybe they'll recommend you for more and more challenging projects, or recommend that people ask your advice for things, and a lot more. The other way that you can share wins is publicly on professional networks. And you can do this in a variety of ways. You can write blog posts. You can talk about lessons learned from successes. And this might kind of come off as sounding like shameless self-promotion. But when it's done in a way that benefits other people, this will absolutely get you noticed. The public space is watched by people of influence. And a lot of those people could potentially support you, they could sponsor you, they could promote you, and they could support and sponsor and promote your activities as well. So when you share something publicly, a win, when people respond, it's important that you take the time to engage, that you reply, that you make conversation, that you forge connections with those people in order to cultivate and foster relationships. Now, this tweet from Kelly Vaughn was from February, and she said, "I don't want to come off as bragging, but no, stop, remove that. Please share your accomplishments. You're allowed to be publicly proud of what you've achieved. You earned it." There's absolutely nothing wrong with being proud of our successes. We deserve validation for all of the blood, sweat, tears, and tremendous hard work that we put into all of the things that we do. So don't be shy about this, really. Number 4 is be kind. And this sounds incredibly oversimplified to say, well, just be kind or just be nice to people. But kindness goes a very, very long way. The basic tenets of kindness are pretty straightforward. Kindness is about having empathy for people who might be facing challenges, for example. It's about exercising compassion even when you disagree, or especially when you disagree with somebody. It's also about having patience and understanding for other people's points of view. Again, this is even more important when you are communicating with somebody that maybe you have conflicting points of view. And everyone is fighting their own battles. So you never know what other people are going through. People don't publicly go around wearing a badge that says, "I'm struggling with XYZ right now." So being kind can make a huge difference to people who are having their own personal struggles. As you well know, you have your own personal struggles as well. And when people are kind to you, it makes that kindness go just a little bit further, knowing that even though you're having trouble, people take the time to have little gestures of good faith and kindness. And also, people notice kindness and they repay it. So if you are a pleasant person to engage with, then people are going to enjoy and look forward to interacting with you. This is simply a fact. I think if you sort of think about all of the people in your life and in your workplace, think about the people that you really enjoy working with or interacting with or helping or being helped by. And this is true both at work, but also in public communities, at events, in the tech community, maybe even on GitHub or a support forum or something like that. People are going to be a lot more receptive to interacting and will reach out to you if you are kind, and they will pay it back to you. So as sort of a summary, being kind makes you a few things. It makes you approachable to people who are maybe looking to build a connection with someone. It makes you appealing to the people that you're trying to build a connection with or trying to network with. And it also makes you memorable. If people remember you as being someone who's very pleasant to be around, then they're more likely to reach out to you in the future and want to talk to you and want to sort of reinforce that connection that you've made. Number 5 is get uncomfortable. Now, by general definition, nobody actually enjoys being uncomfortable. It's not something that we generally are super happy about. But also it's true that we have the opportunity to grow the most when we venture outside of our comfort zone. There's a lot to gain when we try things out that are going to stretch us a little bit, that are going to be something that we wouldn't normally do. So I would encourage you to try something new. This might be something like public speaking. Maybe you can speak at a meetup or conference. And if this is something that might be a little bit new to you, doing a lightning talk at UDC might be a really great way to seg into this. You could also build something with a technology or a language or a framework or a library that you've never used before. You could also try taking a job that you've never done before. And I want to talk a little bit more about this, because if you think about the jobs you're qualified for, or maybe that you're overqualified for, ask yourself if you have room to grow in that position. Will it be an interesting challenge? Is it going to further your career? It might end up being sort of a temporary change of pace, but not more than that. You might find yourself sort of back on that hamster wheel again after the sort of sparklies wear off, and you find out that you're just doing the same thing, sort of in a different building. So I would encourage people to try applying for jobs that you actually haven't done before. And if the title is the same, maybe look for an expansion of responsibilities or a slightly expanded required skill set. You can even go in completely different directions. This is totally a possible thing to do. A lot of people have done it. I myself actually am classically trained as a biologist. I did field research, and I left my field research career to go into tech, and then I worked my way up in tech and became an engineering manager, and I left that role to go into a technical content writing role. And I loved it. I loved that. And that last step actually was the thing that ultimately led me to where I am now, which is developer relations leadership. So try things that are outside of your comfort zone, but there's a caveat to this, and that is that this shouldn't be done at the cost of your well-being. If getting outside of your comfort zone at any particular moment is going to cause you undue stress, or you're looking at doing something that's really wildly outside of your zone and you are feeling like it's keeping you up at night or causing you anxiety, then don't do it. Refrain. Because you really are the person who knows yourself best. But you should also know that it can bring tremendous fulfillment, it can bring you career advancement, it can bring you personal success to try new things once in a while. So you may be initially uncomfortable, but keep in mind that this can also bring very significant rewards. It can also open doors that maybe you didn't even realize could be opened. But you have to find a balance, and that's something that you will need to explore for yourself. Number 6 is reach out. And this one's kind of late in the list for a specific reason. Because once you've implemented the other strategies that I've already talked about, then that is the time when you might want to consider reaching out to people you admire, people that might be able to give you advice or mentorship or sponsorship. But it's pretty important not to do this prematurely, because if you reach out as sort of step 1, then it can come across as you asking other people to solve all of your problems for you, but the case may be that you haven't actually invested any of your own time in your own personal growth. And if that is the case, then reaching out does have a risk of backfiring a little bit. You can reach out to different types of people. You can reach out to your extended network. And this might be someone that maybe you don't have a previous relationship with. So if you are trying to connect with somebody that you haven't talked to or spent time with, it's important to be very specific in your outreach. So if you're going to do this, I would recommend that you pick one topic to ask advice on particularly. It's probably good to not just cold call someone and say, hey, I really admire everything about you. Can you please teach me all of your secrets? try to ask about something that's sort of unique, maybe something that isn't what everyone else asks about, so that you can kind of stand apart from the crowd and pique the interest of the person who you are asking for advice. And also be understanding. Don't take it too personally if the person that you reach out to doesn't respond, or if they're simply too busy to sort of take on a mentorship role. Many people who are very popular community influencers get dozens and dozens of requests and messages like this per day, and it can be quite overwhelming. You can also reach out to people who are in your much closer network. So when you're connecting with someone that you work with, or maybe someone who you are acquaintances with who is known for their willingness to mentor other people, then you can kind of take a slightly different approach. You should share what kind of a connection that you're hoping to make. What kind of relationship are you looking to forge with this person? Are you looking to forge a mentorship relationship? Are you looking for just a piece of advice on one particular area? Do you just want to get to know them so that you can connect over coffee or something like that? You should share what they've done that you admire. What things have they accomplished that you really think that they can provide very valuable insight on in order to sort of further your career and help you to accomplish your goals? And then sort of back to the initial point about reaching out too early, you'll want to share your progress so far. You'll want to talk about what you've done thus far in order to grow yourself. Have you worked on setting some goals? Have you worked on talking to your boss and sharing your wins? All of the things that we've sort of covered so far are things that you might want to mention to say, here's the things that in my journey towards, success and personal betterment, these are the things that I've done so far. You'll also want to talk about what are your next steps? What do you think your next steps are? Maybe you've come as far as you can on your own, and your logical next step is to find someone with a little bit more experience in a particular area and ask them for their advice, and maybe that's the step that you're at right now. Also, start small. It's a pretty big ask to approach somebody and say, hey, will you mentor me? Mentorship and sponsorship and things like that can often be a very long-term thing. It can be regular meetings over weeks or months. And starting small is a great way to have an introduction, to open that conversation. Maybe this could be a quick video call if it's somebody who's only online, or for example, with COVID-19, this is probably the best strategy. Or when the world opens up again, it can be maybe an invitation to go grab coffee or something. So directly reaching out to people in order to forge those personal connections is incredibly valuable. And the last item, number 7, is celebrate milestones. This is not the same as sharing wins. Celebration of milestones is specifically for you. When you achieve something, it's very important that you give yourself credit. You should take the opportunity to feel good about it, to celebrate it. This can be for big events, big accomplishments, or much smaller milestones. Maybe as you're working through your goals that you've set, your personal goals, every time you check one off, take that opportunity to celebrate the fact that you accomplished that. I think one of the important takeaways here is that you're never going to feel fulfilled by the things that you're doing if you don't actually take the opportunity to recognize and reward yourself for your own hard work. If you're just go, go, go all the time and you're not taking the time to say, hey, I did something great, I worked really hard, I had a desirable outcome, and I'm really happy with that. Pat on the back, good job me. If you don't take the time to do that, then you're going to feel like you're constantly in this rat race and you aren't actually moving forward when in fact you are. So lastly, I have a couple of items that are sort of bonus. And the first one is invest in self-care. This is super, super important, especially if you're in a fast-paced industry with a risk of burnout. I love these comics from Liz and Molly. They have an exceptionally high quality collection of really great thoughts depicted visually on things that are very important in a career or in a workplace. And this says, what I thought would make me productive, all hard work, so sort of the all work and no play idea, and then what actually does make me really productive. And a slice that's less than half is hard work, is all of these things that fall under the category of self-care. Another one is do what you love. You'll want to make sure that you're cultivating hobbies that aren't related to coding and work. And I really kind of want to emphasize this one because for a long time in tech, there was this idea of, oh, well, 10x developers eat, sleep, and breathe code, and they get off their 9-to-5 job and they immediately go and work on their personal sites and they freelance on the side and all of these things. And it's actually really important to step away from that, especially in an industry like tech where it is so fast-paced and it is go, go, go all the time. Another important point is that you have to reserve time for those hobbies. So if you cultivate the hobbies and then you don't allow yourself the opportunity to actually engage in them and enjoy them, then they're not really doing you a whole lot of good. And then also take the time to spend time with loved ones. This could be your family, this could be your friends, this could be pets. It's really important to kind of step away, get out of your own head, and spend time with people who care about you. So I really hope that these tips are useful for advancing your goals as well as your career and for gaining a sense of accomplishment and a sense of fulfillment from all of the things that you do that you work so hard at. These slides are available at this bit.ly link here. I also am on Twitter here, so if you would like to connect with me afterwards, I would love to chat. And thank you very much for your time.
Woohoo! Thank you so much, Kim. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me throw video back on here. Yeah, Kim, if you don't mind grabbing the bit.ly link, we can throw it with the HTTP URL in there.
I am grabbing it now.
Awesome. So let me grab the slides real quick. Not that there's much to throw up with for the Q&A portion, but I want to make sure we have that available for later. Let's see here. Okay. Oops. Sorry. And then, so like we mentioned, there's 3 places where you can share some questions. We have chat, which is the bottom right. We have a Q&A portion, and then you can also feel free to raise your hand, which is just a button, and we can then go ahead and unmute you to make sure you get a chance to ask your question. I'll start with mine, Kim, if you don't mind. Something that stuck out the first time I heard the talk was the sharing your wins with your manager, which is something I hadn't thought about previously and really liked as an idea. And I think over time in a workplace, you start to see the benefits of that. Can you talk about any examples, either from your own experience or just kind of hypothetically, generally, the types of things that someone might not think to share with a manager that that might be worthwhile?
I think small stuff is often overlooked by people as they think that it's too insignificant to share. And one of the things that I really try to do with my teams is ask them about that stuff. And also, the manager is in a position to amplify your wins, like to the company, to other people in the company. This is a fact that I didn't cover in the talk specifically, but when you share wins with your manager, then your manager can then go on to make recommendations to other people in the company for you on your behalf. So maybe that's running it up the chain a little higher. Maybe it's to other teams that you've said, oh, I would really like to work with these people. I've accomplished this, thing that's related to the work that they do, and they can go and make a recommendation for that. So yeah, a lot of where I don't have like a single specific example, but a lot of where I've gotten in my career has been more or less a direct net result of being pretty vocal about sharing accomplishments with my managers at the time, because I could sort of, in some companies more than others, I could see that some managers have so many direct reports, or they are a little bit removed from the day-to-day of the people on their teams, and going in and saying, by the way, as a roundup, like, here are all of the awesome things that I've done recently. Here's the things that I shipped. I gave this talk, and these are the great things that people said about it. I have ideas because of that. And I've seen that show up in like my performance reviews and things like that. So the manager on the spot might say, oh, cool, that's great. But they do remember, and then it comes back later as, and Kim shared that she accomplished all of these things. So here's sort of the net rewards of a positive performance review and more opportunities.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate that. That makes a ton of sense. I'll hold my next question in case Ben or Tracy or Chris or anyone else has something. I'm going to go ahead with my next question for now. You mentioned also when looking for a next role, considering something outside of your comfort zone, and I think we all hear a lot of stories from people later on in their careers about some kind of, maybe it ended up being a critical point in their career where they switched and did something that was uncomfortable for them at the time. Do you have any advice on how to know the right blend of something new versus too much the same? Because like you mentioned, you don't want to go too far outside your comfort zone where you feel like you're drowning. So basically, any advice on trying to figure out what that next job description might look like, or next opportunity to volunteer for at your current role?
This is initially maybe going to sound like a cop-out answer, but it really depends on you. Like, it depends on the person so much and the circumstances that you're in. I know that some people, for example, are in a position where it's not a great situation at their previous job. So they become sort of desperate to leave. And I was in this position myself. At that time, I wasn't super clear-headed about kind of what I was applying for, because I was like, I just need to get out. Ultimately, that ended up working out for me really well, but it can also backfire pretty significantly and land you in a place that you don't really want to be. I would sort of say that if you are so take that scenario, for example. If you are in a situation where you're really just kind of done with what you're doing and you're ready for something new, but you're stressed out about the idea of looking for a job, because that is a huge endeavor in and of itself. And a lot of times when people are burnt out, it's very hard to sort of get back into the hiring game. So they have a tendency to look for things that they're really familiar with, that they've already done, that they know that they're like a shoo-in candidate for. So if that's the case, and you do find yourself in a position where you're looking for jobs with the same title, it can be nice to look at the sort of list of responsibilities and say, well, there's a few things on here that I've never done before. But, maybe the net majority is things that I do know or am comfortable with, and I'm curious about exploring these other things. But where I would draw the line is if you're applying for a job that you look at that and you're like, I'm overqualified for that, then that's not necessarily going to be the right thing. If you know, like without any shadow of a doubt, that you've done every single thing on that list and more, then it's probably not going to be something that you're going to feel fulfilled in for very long. unless you're in a position to sort of carve out more of the role yourself. And I know not all jobs and positions sort of offer that opportunity, but it can be an opportunity to find out that answer if you come in and say, this is a great, looking role. I have experience in all of these things. Have you also thought about adding this to the role? Or is there room for me to expand my skills in this area? And if they say, oh, great, yeah, like we're looking for a candidate to help shape the role and to go above and beyond these core requirements, then that can be a really good opportunity as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's wonderfully thorough. And with that level of distinction, I don't think an initial answer of it depends is at all a cop-out. I have one more question of my own, but I'm going to pause for Ben because it looks like he might have something.
Yes, I do. So Kim, as someone who manages a team, I think one of the challenges I've seen with people is that, they want to learn new things, but obviously like balancing that personal life outside of work and then learning new things on top of the 9 to 5 is tough. So I know that some cultures, they have they allow people to devote like one day out of a month to sort of research or learn new things. Like, do you have any sort of ideas as far as like how as a manager you can help to encourage those who might not have the ability to spend, evenings doing those sort of things to boost themselves?
Yeah, I think a lot of that can be done with careful management also, because one of the things that I try to do when we do goal setting for teams is look at the broader spectrum of things that the people on the team are interested in. And there's 3 questions that I like to ask people. And the 3 questions are, what are you doing now that you really like, that you want to continue to do and do more of? What are you not doing that you would like to start doing? And what are you doing that you don't want to do anymore, that you want to stop? And knowing the answers to those 3 questions can give you so much insight into where people maybe want to go, where they're feeling a little bit like they're not moving forward enough. And then as you're doing sort of goal setting for the team, you can kind of ensure that the things that are on people's plates fall into a category where they're going to learn on the job, where they have that opportunity to spend the time developing professionally. And that's, sort of in the normal scope of job duties. But things like having a monthly hack day or having a professional development budget at the company, things like that are always really good as well. The thing I guess I always want to be mindful about that is that sometimes people don't know what to do with those days and they end up just working normally instead. So building it into the normal structure of here's the things that you're responsible for, in your normal job can really help just for managers to be mindful of where somebody is going and where they want to be, and maybe taking things off their plate that they are just not interested in.
Great, thanks.
Awesome, thanks again. We had a couple questions come in. I'll relay the one first from Bill. So you mentioned that setting personal goals that won't cause undue stress. How do you find undue stress? And how do you find the balance between being challenged and being overwhelmed?
Those are excellent questions. So with the undue stress one, I think that if I'm starting to spend too much time, to the point where I start to feel a little bit anxious, like there's a difference between having a lot to do and doing it and feeling like anxious about it. So there's sort of physical symptoms that go along with being stressed or having anxiety. And there's kind of this, if I still feel passionate about it, if I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do, but I'm going to do it and it's going to be great. Or if I'm dreading it, like if you start to feel like I've bitten off too much and it's just making me exhausted and I just don't feel like I can do this, then it's like pretty nuanced, but I kind of come back around to like the physical reaction to things that are on your plate. If it's something that causes a negative physical reaction, then that is a good sign that it's undue stress. And the other question was, I'm sorry, can you repeat it?
Yeah, definitely. So how do you define the undue stress, and then how do you find the balance between being challenged and being overwhelmed?
I think it kind of comes back to a similar thing, but maybe instead of talking about physical reaction to something, if you talk about time commitment. So when you are challenged, but you're spending a lot of time on something, but you're actively happy to work on it, then that's still within sort of healthy boundaries. But if you are spending so much time that you're becoming exhausted and you're starting to feel like, I don't have time for my hobbies anymore, I don't have time for self-care, I don't have time to invest in myself, then you're definitely getting into sort of the realm of being overwhelmed.
Nice. Thank you for that. And thanks to Bill for that question. And then we have a question from Anna. So I'll just read it off. It's in the Q&A section. Comparing yourself to yourself yesterday, we often learn something new, big or small. When do you think this could be a good time to stop learning this something and move on to the next something? So how can we see when this is enough in terms of, I think, learning a new thing? When is the right time to start learning the next thing, maybe?
So I would challenge you to kind of think more abstractly about that concept. So we can learn brand new things, and that's absolutely something that falls within the realm of this. But we can also kind of iterate on the things that we already know. So if we are saying, like, to ourselves, my expertise level in Vue is intermediate right now, what would it take to get to, like a level of mastery? And this kind of iteration is a completely valid solution for learning new things, even though it's not something that's like brand new. It's something that you still didn't know yesterday. So like if you take the example even from trivia about slots, like if you didn't know the answer to that question and then you know the answer later and you understand what all of the different answers meant, then that's absolutely something that you didn't know yesterday. So it can be large, or it can be small, or it can be iterative. And I think having the mindset of accepting that all of that counts and nothing is like too small to fit into that category can really help you to look back and say, wow, I learned a ton of new things. And they're just things that I didn't know the day before. They're not necessarily something that's going to save the world or end poverty or anything like that. But there are things I didn't know yesterday, so that's still really important.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. And I think Anna's got to thank you as well. I don't see any open questions in chat at the moment or in Q&A. I'm going to abuse my time and ask one more. And then if anyone has one more question, we'd have time for that. But then we'll finish out in a bit with Tracy's round 2 of trivia. Tracy, did you have a question as well? I noticed that
I do have a question.
Oh, please.
But
you go ahead, please.
Okay, so Kim will understand this question. So like the self-promotion, sharing your wins, that's treated very differently when women do it than men. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think
what's a good way to approach it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think making it something that is beneficial to other people also is a great strategy for everybody. That's not a distinction between women and men, but I absolutely know what you're saying, where a lot of times for women it can be like, oh, she's just bragging or whatever.
Yeah.
She's just trying to get a leg up or whatnot,
yeah.
Which is a huge challenge, and it's a problem in tech. It's a big problem in tech. So I don't want to sort of diminish the fact that it's a huge problem, because it absolutely is. But coming at it, no matter what gender you are, from the standpoint of like, here's, like a tidbit that I have accomplished, but I have turned it into something that other people can also benefit from is great. So even if you sort of built something really neat, if you just put up like a really quick little blog post and it says, here's how you can also do this, or here's how, this really helped me in my role at work and it can also help you. And it's kind of it, in a way, kind of like the summation of the talk that I just gave. Like, these are all things that essentially this entire talk is really boils down to me sharing my wins, right? Because these are things that worked well for me, but I have felt that it was really important to format this in a way where other people can benefit from it and it's useful and helpful information. So I know that that's a little bit of like an indirect answer to the question being specifically about like women in this position versus men, but I think it's just good practice. It's like good hygiene in general. It's like good bragging hygiene, I guess I would call it, for anyone who wanted to sort of promote themselves. But also it can just be about like moving the needle, like changing that status quo. If people can just get used to seeing everybody be proud of themselves, then the stigma around it that is associated with any particular type of person hopefully will start to go away. But yeah, it's a long, slow process.
Yep. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question, Tracy, and thanks, Kim, for that answer. We have one more Q&A question. So let's make this the last one, and then we'll switch over to the bragging rights trivia. From Bill again. In terms of goals, what are some examples of quote contribute to a community? So what would that look like as a potential goal, or what awesome. Concrete examples? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways you can do this. A few of the ways that come up a lot when I'm looking at contributions from kind of a community perspective, because I work a lot with the communities, is putting out some kind of relevant content. If you even just record like a 5-minute video or a little short blog post that just says, here's like this one little trick that I discovered, sharing that with the world is totally contributing to a community. Opening a GitHub pull request can be kind of like a big, daunting one, but even if it's a pull request to fix a typo in docs, that is completely helpful and it will help everybody. Even if it's opening an issue, if you don't know the answer, but you have found something that other people might also be struggling with, that is absolutely contributing to a community. Going into a forum, asking questions in a forum is contributing, because many people, probably for everybody who isn't asking, you're asking something they also want the answer to. And, sort of the flip side of that is answering questions in a forum or a community, or even on Twitter. If you search for something that you know a lot about and then find people with questions and just write a really quick answer, that's totally contributing as well. So it can be this whole sort of range, this whole spectrum of different types of activities, and it doesn't need to be anything big. It can just be, if you help even one person by putting something out there, then that is tremendously valuable.
Ben, while you were nodding so hard that your head looked like it was going to fall off, would you like to add on at all to that, as someone who helps manage various communities, both code and the communities around code?
Well, I just, Kim's sort of mention about docs, I think it just really echoes as part of the Vue docs team. It's just, anytime you have questions, you find things confusing, that's incredibly important, because as much as content writers, we try to think of the beginner mindset as much as we humanly can. We always have blind spots and context we're not aware of when it comes to things. So yes, please raise those issues, ask those questions. They're incredibly valuable, and we super appreciate it.
I was going to say, in that vein, I think it's something that we try to do at our work, which is every time someone's onboarding to a new project, we try to encourage them, if you come across something that doesn't make sense, please flag that, or please open a pull request to change that bit of documentation, or just let us know so that we can update it. And I've found that from an open source perspective, just applying that attitude to the new projects or libraries that you're trying is extremely useful to the community, but is also probably the least intimidating way to contribute to a project for the first time, which is, like Kim said, like a typo, or this step was missing and here's what I needed to do to follow it. So yeah, contributing to documentation in an open source way, I think, is huge.
I would. My one caveat to that, though, is that
Sure.
when issuing a pull request, usually I know that on the docs team we do our best to always explain why something's closed, but that doesn't mean the contribution wasn't useful if it wasn't merged. I can't stress that enough. Sometimes there are a lot of things that go into, why docs are written a certain way or why we exclude certain things. Because, for example, if you have a tip box for every single caveat when learning about props or slots, it would be almost impossible to get through the docs. So, there are sometimes, while your PR may not be able to be like merged immediately, oftentimes it will inspire discussion for future things, which then we can obviously reach out to you for help on those things in the future. So just keep that in mind. And then as far as Vue docs concerned, actually, will make one note. When making sort of PR changes to docs, I would recommend starting out on the smaller side. We've seen sometimes when people first get started, they take this time to rewrite this entire section, and it's like huge, large, and a lot of times open source is challenging because now you have this gigantic thing where like maybe parts of it are really good, but then you're just like, oh, like how do I manage this? And especially when it comes to open source, a lot of us are doing this not necessarily on our 9 to 5. So if you want to build trust in the community and contribute, start, as Jack and Kim have mentioned, start small, and then if you want to like restructure things, like talk to the team members. I know, especially speaking at least for the Vue docs team, we're fairly open and available. So if you have something like major you want to talk through, like talk to us first. I don't want you spending like weeks writing this thing and then like we can't merge it because we're working on Vue 3 docs or whatever. And so just something to keep in mind when it comes to open source contributions.
Yeah,
So
I would
Ben,
definitely echo. Sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say real quick that it's not just the Vue docs, but like my first commit was actually to the Vue events, right? So there's other community docs that you can contribute to too.
And Kim?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Gatsby is open source as well. So we have all of the things that Ben just said really strongly resonated with me. But one of the things that I think is of note also for community contributions is if your PR doesn't get merged, if it is something that is like a caveat and it's just something that can't go into the docs for being sheerly like overwhelming, then write a little tip about it or make a little video or something so that when people run into that same thing, they can search for it and your content will come up and will help them, even if it isn't in like the docs. That's totally a great contribution to the community as well.
That's a really good call. I maybe before we end, I can go find that XKCD link again, Denver Coder 20 or whatever username. Never have I felt more connected to someone than when I see an open issue from 4 years ago with no comments.
Yep.
Tragic. So anytime that you can help the person who's going to come after you with the same issue. I feel like that's a good positive note to close out the questions. So for the people who can unmute themselves, thank you, Kim. We very much appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So I have a couple quick things to share. So this was our Q&A slide, so important. Tracy mentioned, well, we're gonna do trivia time. Theoretically, when we're eventually back in person, the prizes for something like this are going to be fully designed by Tracy, our brand new badges. Tracy, would you like to say a couple words about the inspiration that overtook you to create
Okay, I have to brag about this because I am so not
share your
creative.
win.
So
Share your win, Tracy.
I am so not creative. So when this came from, I wanted our YouTube channel to have a real URL, and one of the criteria is you have to have a masthead or something. Mm-hmm. So this came from that, thinking about how am I going to design this thing. And I don't know, it was a moment of inspiration, and I'm never really that creative, and so I was incredibly excited
Yeah.
that I came up with this. So
I would say, given your role, you must be underselling your creativity a little bit, but this is excellent. This is very good.
I know this was the most inspired things I've ever done. So yeah.
Yeah. So these will be at a yet unnamed time. We'll start distributing these. So that's something to look forward to. But while we're just competing for bragging rights, Tracy, would you like to take over for round 2 and to close us out? A final thank you to Kim. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Cam.
Thank
We
you
really
so much for
Yeah,
having
thank
me.
you.
Yeah, definitely a benefit of being remote. We can have great speakers like Kim join us. I think that's about it. Please take a look at the Lightning Talk links. We've shared that a couple times. Message us, reach out to us, Twitter, Gmail. We're really happy to help you workshop anything. And like Kim mentioned a couple times, which we appreciated, it could be a great way into contributing back to a community in a way that can definitely help career growth. I think that's about it. Anything else from the panelists?
That's all.
All right. Our next meetup is July 15th, I believe. I'll confirm that date while I'm talking. July 15th.
That sounds right.
Cool. And it'll be for the Lightning Talk. So let us know as you have ideas for those. And we'll see you Wednesday, July 15th. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.